From the Tower, a podcast dedicated to the pride of EA Band by two band directors who have nothing better to do than record their after-school ramblings.
Welcome back after our holiday hiatus. My name is David J. Gambino, the Assistant Director of Bands here at East Ascension High School, joined by my partner in crime, Mr. Charles Lee. How you doing, bud?
Yo.
Of course. And our wonderful producer, Coach Brownfield. Coach Brownfield, how you doing?
I'm not wonderful, but I'm a producer. Other than that, doing well. Overcame tennis elbow there, which delayed this podcast there. No joke. Getting older, not a joke. But I hear tennis elbow is an ageless injury there.
Oh, yeah.
It is nothing to play. I would imagine some instrumentalists might have that issue there. The little wraparound action there with the hand and stressing out that forearm.
For sure. Absolutely. Especially percussionists as well. And considering half of our tennis team is band members, they struggle with tennis elbow from that. So shout out to our tennis team and our kids on the tennis team. Well, we're happy to be back. We've got a chock-filled program for you today. This is arguably what a lot of band directors would say is their favorite time of year, right? This season.
Definitely not as hot.
Yeah, definitely not as hot, much colder. Not dealing with the outside stuff, but concert season is the season that we're in. If you don't know, band is divided kind of into two distinct areas-ish, marching season in the fall, concert season in the spring, and obviously there's some overlap and things that happen in between, but a lot of band directors prefer this time of year because, like we said, it's not hot. We're inside. We're working on different styles of music, maybe some of the stuff that we like more or less, just depending on who you are. We like it all, but definitely one of my favorite parts of the year. We're also happy to be back after the writer's strike prevented us from writing. I had to stand up with the actors and the writers.
Solidarity. Yes.
Stand up for.
I didn't think about that extending to composers and arrangers.
No, we're just going to not talk about it. So we're back in the concert band Winter Guard season, as well as jazz band and mariachi are kind of kicking up. For those of you that don't know, we started a mariachi band a couple years ago. Or last year, rather. Mr. Lee's leading that charge. You want to tell us a little bit about that real quick?
Man, I don't know. I've given the whole speech about 1,000 times now. Let me think if there's a condensed version.
I was going to say, give me the abbreviated little nuggets.
Basically, there's a need for some more multicultural education at East Ascension, specifically with us having a large Hispanic population. Mm-hmm. And next door to us in Texas, mariachi is a legitimate ensemble on the same level as band, orchestra, and choir.
Oh, yeah.
And so I started going to conferences and things, and I started one up here to offer something like that here at EA.
Yeah, and it's great. The kids are great. It was super impactful last year, even in the early stages. Just like we were all blown away with how good and how beautiful it sounded, and it was really magical.
Well, I wanted to make sure that it was not a project but a program
for real,
and that it wasn't going to be a parody, and it was going to be a legitimate thing, and that's how we've approached it from the very beginning.
I think it's really funny that one of your mentors in that just happens to be like this Latin Grammy-winning, internationally recognized mariachi teacher, and it's just like you're just talking to him like regular guy, and then you're looking through your books one day, and it's like, wait, hang on. That's the same guy, so.
Never came up in conversation.
I know. It's one of those in every neighborhood, right? I mean,
I wish.
Right,
right.
Well, you're a Grammy-nominated, aren't you?
I'm a Grammy-nominated studio assistant.
Oh.
Yeah, my professor in college, Chuck Owen, has a band, Chuck Owen's Jazz Surge.
I know Chuck.
And Chuck writes some really great compositions for jazz, big band and things like that. I wouldn't call it big band. It's modern jazz ensemble. And on his last album, Whispers in the Wind, which was nominated for a Grammy, I'm the studio assistant on it, so I'll take my Grammy nomination.
Any way you get it.
Any way you can get
it.
But
it's real.
there. Hey, they wouldn't have those music stands. They wouldn't have their coffee if it wasn't for me.
Right.
So I'll take it. So speaking of jazz band, we've got our jazz band kicking up, the Legionnaires. We also have a second jazz ensemble this year, and we're in search of a name. So if anybody wants to help us come up with a name for our second jazz ensemble this year, shoot me some ideas.
Comment section. Comment section.
Get in the comments.
Every
Those
time
you
I see
Bradley
someone
Mulligan
like
fans.
open up naming things to the public, it's going to be something like Jazzy McToot Toot or something like that. So you might want to be careful.
That's okay. We'll take it and we'll look at it and comment it on the next episode of From the Tower. We got some performance dates coming up. March 1st, we'll be at the Loyola Jazz Fest. April 13th, we'll be at ULM's Jazz Festival. And April 20th, we'll be at the Bill Evans Jazz Festival at Southeastern. Those are three big events. We're also going to have an event with Francois Park, the retirement assisted living center. We did a gig at Francois Bend last year, and they loved it. And so they want to do a whole big event, and the mariachi band will be at it, and both jazz ensembles and jambalaya dinner. So more details on that coming at the end of March. We'll let you know.
Jambalaya, don't say. You don't say.
Oh yeah. I mean, anywhere I go and jambalaya is present, I'm a happy camper. So some show news for you. Like I mentioned those dates for jazz band. We've also got Winter Guard shows coming up. There's one in Biloxi this weekend, and they've got a few coming up at Dutchtown and at Denham Springs, and then our championships will be at the end of March as well in the Civic Center in Thibodaux. So we're excited about those for our Winter Guards.
That's the Warren J. Harang Civic Center.
That's it. Warren J. Harang. It is. Those coordinates are burned into my GPS. It's pretty easy to get there, though. And then we've got our festival season coming up, which kind of leads us into, which is at the end of March as well. Everything's at the end of March. It kind of leads us to our topic for today. So one of the things I mentioned last semester is we were talking about adjudication or judging or how do we get rated and things like that. And we were talking specifically about marching band, and so I thought a good idea. I said, we'll take a look at a marching band competition sheet, and we'll talk about it and the purposes of it and the values of it and things like that. But then as we got into concert season, I was like, why don't we compare both sides of the coin and take a look at the marching band sheet and see how it relates to our concert band sheet to show that. Are they really that different? What are the differences? What are the similarities? And then to talk about the value of competition instead of the importance of competition. And let's start with that topic, Mr. Lee. I'm very picky when I'm saying the importance versus the value. I believe in the value of competition. What's your take on that?
Well, for the uninitiated, the importance and value, like top layer, surface layer, is for band and performing ensembles, contests, competitions, adjudications, evaluate that to us is the same thing as taking a LEAP test, or taking a benchmark or an EOC or whatever the new name for the same things are in a given school year, right? Mm-hmm. And so,
or a football game or a basketball game,
you've got like
golf match.
Whatever, and so it's almost like much like a sport or much like a class. You do your homework, you do 1,000 problems, and then you get a single hour and a half one day to fill in the bubbles correctly. Or you get hours upon hours of practice to get 3 hours to score higher than somebody else. For us, it's days and days and weeks of practice to get a performance on. And so for me, I feel like the value there is we get an outside entity with some kind of rubric, with some kind of scoring system that tells us outside of our own opinion, because we can get very ensemble deaf. Meaning that once we establish a sound for our group, that's just what it sounds like, and it's always good because that's what we've done, because we hear it every single day. And so to have another professional come out and say, well, here are the things that could be improved. Here's the things that you're doing well. Here's the things I need more of. Here's the things I need less of, based on a set of criteria that as music professionals we kind of quote unquote agree upon, And so it's really good to see, like, not only for me personally, how are the kids doing? What are the kids doing? But how am I doing it? Because I have to teach it to them. It's on most levels, the things that they produce is just a reflection of my teaching and my conducting and my stuff. So those are my initial thoughts on value
Yeah.
and principle of contest and adjudication.
The other surface level I'll give you is the transportation factor, like going to watch other bands, going to new places. Many of our students haven't been outside of Ascension Parish,
Right.
So being able to take them to places like Thibodeau or Zachary, even, or if we go further than that, they're we last year we went to Mississippi, we went to Hattiesburg, or not Hattiesburg, sorry,
Vicksburg.
Vicksburg, thank you. I'm blanking on it. Went to Vicksburg and Natchez, and we went up to Monroe, all over these places to expose these kids to different cultural aspects. And I know it's still in the, in the state or close to the state, but the idea of pushing them, excuse me, the idea of getting them out of their comfort zone and going to, different places and things like that is a huge part of it. But when I mention importance versus value, sometimes I feel like we have a tendency to put too much emphasis on these competitions, and which is why I want to pull the value out of it. What are we going to gain from it? It's important to have a goal, right? It's important to have a focus, but to put all of our focus into that one event is a fool's errand, in my opinion.
I agree.
It's a checkpoint. We want to use it as a place to get forward from and get comments and great feedback and wonderful educators, listening and giving us advice and giving our students advice and reinforcing the things that we say. I can't tell you how many times that we go, did you hear that from us this year, children? And they're like, yeah, we heard it. And it's like,
Every time.
Great. Well, why didn't you do it?
Right.
But yeah, exactly. So I struggle with sometimes when band directors get so focused on like, oh, we have to go to festival, we have to do this competition, we have to do this thing. It's like we don't have to.
Right.
We can still do the same teaching and learning and growing without those things. And you can find other ways to bring that same value that these competitions and festivals offer to our programs. There's many different ways to do that.
Right. And again, I feel there's something that a lot of band directors fall prey to is something I kind of mentioned a minute ago, is like, how are we doing? How the kids are only going to do what we teach them to do.
Yep.
And it's very, very easy to get blinded by the trophies and the plaques
Yep.
and the accolades.
We all like
and
shiny things. They're
into
great.
thinking, oh, well, I did this. I'm the director. The director did. It becomes very director centered rather than, in my opinion, it needs, actually, I'm just going to say it should be student centered and ensemble. What is in the best interest of the ensemble and the students of the ensemble that particular season? Because it changes season to season.
I can't tell you how many times that like I've heard like, well, I guess I'm just going to change this so that we can go to festival and get a certain score. And it's like, do your kids like this music? Are they being challenged by it?
Right.
They're, without getting into too many details, I know of one story where a teacher was kind of almost not forced to go to festival, but kind of pushed to going into festival because it would hurt the other ensembles at his school. And he had just taken his ensemble, took like a major performance out of state. And it was like such a huge honor that they did that. And then when he gets back home and they're like, everybody's like, well, you got to go to festival, right? You've got to go to this competition now. And he's like, well, no, we don't, because we just did this other thing. And they're like, well, you do, or it's going to penalize your other group.
Right.
And like, that's where I have problems with like our system and why people are putting too much importance rather than looking at the value.
Right.
Instead of in providing for and caring for, the students and giving them an opportunity to perform in a successful way, they're, too busy playing by the rules sometimes.
Right.
So-
Right. Well, rules that other band directors made up 75 years ago.
Yep.
Yep. Which
So-
is
Get off my soapbox on that. Let's talk about these comparisons. All right. So what I'm looking at in front of me is two sheets. One of them is the Band and Orchestra Large Ensemble Assessment Stage Performance Grading Criteria sheet, and the other one is from the Dutchtown Invitational Marching Festival. And they look a little bit different because this is a actual grading sheet and this is a rubric. But we're going to compare some of the things. Now, with the marching side of things, the big difference obviously is marching, right? You know, we're not talking about color guard. We're not talking about moving on the field. We're not. Well, that's the difference. Yeah.
Right.
We're not talking about the visuals and stuff like that. We're just talking about the music adjudication. Okay. So on this first section, we've got tone quality, breath support, consistency of timbre, intonation, center of tone and pitch, balance and blend. All things that go towards making good core sounds. And so if we flip over here to our adjudicator sheet, what's the first thing we see?
Tone.
Tone, right? Then right underneath that, intonation, right? Those are the first two things that are in this first section, tone quality and intonation. So clearly, we want people making characteristic sounds with good tone, with good intonation, and that covers a majority of what we're talking about.
And I tell the kids all the time, both in the springtime and in the fall, like we talk about tone and core sounds all the time. Just because you're moving or just because you're outside doesn't mean you shouldn't approach playing music the same way we would if we're getting ready for a concert.
Correct. Yes, we want them to play a little louder. Yes, we want them to play a little bit brassier, but I would describe that as the characteristic sound of a marching band.
Right.
You know, and you can still
like a genre almost.
Exactly. You can, you wouldn't want, it might sound cool, nylon string guitars on a Metallica album. No. You know, at least in the heavy sections, right?
They did the Lou Reed thing, and no one was happy with that.
I mean, I would necessarily want, an oboe on a funk album. You know, not to say that it couldn't be done and it couldn't be cool, but
could work doesn't always equate should work.
To should work, yeah. And doesn't always just like translate to sonic quality.
Right.
So regardless, tone quality, intonation, these can be taught the same ways, right? And like, so what's a characteristic sound? Well, a trumpet should sound like a trumpet without being too nasty, too edgy, right? A clarinet should sound warm and rich and dark, but shouldn't be too nasally. A tuba should have this big, rich tone, but not be wompy. So we're looking for tones that specifically describe the instrument. Same thing with percussion. Like, I'm not going to bring a concert snare out onto the field for my whole marching snare line to play, because they're supposed to sound different. With the evolution of marching band, the evolution of concert band, those instruments are supposed to sound different.
Right.
So we want specific tonal qualities, and good intonation is good intonation regardless.
Right.
The only thing that you're teaching differently is the baritone intonation is going to be a little bit different than the euphonium natural intonation. But that's just technique stuff. So speaking of technique, in the next section for the Dutchtown sheet, technique and accuracy, rhythm, rhythmic clarity, tempo, pulse control, articulation, attacks and releases, consistency across the ensemble. And what's the next thing we see on this large ensemble sheet?
Technique.
And let's see, consistently, interpretation of rhythmic patterns, key signatures, correct notes, attention to correct interpretation and articulation, dexterity and flexibility with only minor flaws, entrances and releases. So we're looking at almost identical sheets.
With a key word being consistent.
Yes, which the next point we were going to get to.
Right.
So do you want to talk about those different, they've got these sub-caption keywords over here, and then kind of we rank everything in, at least in the concert band setting, but also very similarly in the marching band setting, as superior, excellent, good, fair, and poor.
Right.
And those can either translate to like a superior as a 1 or a superior is an A. They're just certain, slightly different grading scales to equal the total points.
And for our viewers, we're gonna have the this PDF in the description. So,
Awesome.
So click that, open it up. So That way you'll be able to follow along more closely if you so choose.
Yes.
And so I said a second ago, the term consistently and regularly keeps popping up on these rubrics and these judging sheets. I'm just going to read a couple little things here. Like in technique under the superior. So we have superior, excellent, good, fair, and what's the last one?
Poor.
So 1 being a superior, 2 being excellent, 3, and then in this concert contest for band and orchestra, the judges are grading each subcategory with superior, excellent, good, fair, and then poor, and it's A through E. And so like in a superior technique, there's a consistent and uniform interpretation of rhythmic patterns. Performers are consistently adhere to key signatures. They correct interpretation of clarity of articulation, which is how you you execute the sounds, or is consistent across the ensemble. I can teach any student on campus how to play a G on a saxophone, but can they play a G every single time? The same way every single time. So consistent and regularly is going to be the difference between.
And that's the key too, is not just like, can they do it? Can they play it consistently? Can they play that note consistently every single time with the same consistent tone and timbre and intonation?
Right.
So it's not just, can I play this one thing every time? It's, can I play it the exact same way every time, or what's required of me at that moment, whether it's dynamic changes or articulation changes.
And that consistent word bites you in the butt sometimes too, because when a judge or an adjudicator sees it, like let's say snare drums are too loud on the field. Well, he'll say, just like in the earlier part of the show, I noticed the snare drums were popping out too loud. That's been a consistent thing this whole time, and they're going to nail us on that particular category.
Yeah.
Same thing with like long tones or stuff, or quiet parts in a concert setting. Every time the clarinets do this thing, the middle voices always end up being a little bit out of tune, so we're consistently not doing the right thing, and that bumps you down a couple of times.
And, if we flip it to the sports angle, it would be the same thing as, can your team run a slant on the 20-yard line, and can they run a slant on the 40-yard line, and can they run a slant on the opposite side of the field, close to the, can you do the same thing at different intervals?
Right.
I was working on that with my kids the other day, we all had the same type of note in one section. And when we got to a new section, they were playing it differently. The same note. Literally most of them were playing the same exact note, but it was an accented quarter note. And so it's like, we want them to play this certain way every time. We use da. So I wanted da, da, da. When we got to that later section, they were going da, 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 and cutting it way short. And so I'm like, guys, we have to be consistent with this. This quarter note at the very beginning of the piece has to be the same sound as the quarter note at the end of the piece.
And they do it at execution of rhythms too.
Yes.
A title, we could have two different pieces having, let's say, a dotted quarter 16th or dotted 8/16. And for some reason you change the piece and they forget how to play that.
How it goes.
It's the same rhythm no matter what you do, and so consistent plays a really, really, really big part there,
Yep.
And I want kind of connecting this back to the thing that you were talking about a second ago. Value and purpose and that kind of stuff. I got asked a question the other day from our tag music teacher. I'm taking a different approach for my spring concert this year.
Yeah.
I'm putting my main focus into the spring concert, and I'm using the festival as just a checkpoint along the way. And the question that was asked to me was, well, what are you going to do if you get a 2? My answer was, then I just get a 2.
Yeah.
And 2 still stands for excellent.
And
I'm okay with that.
And this is one of the things that you and I probably have the biggest problem with our band culture society is we put too strong of an emphasis on people getting superiors, making them good band directors or good band programs only. So, if you look at the sheet, a superior should be you're playing perfectly.
Right.
There would the word itself, superior. No one could have done it better today.
Correct.
The second one, B or a 2, is an excellent. I want to be told I'm excellent every day.
Exactly.
If somebody comes up to me and tells me I'm excellent every day, I feel really good about myself. I had a great day. I did a really good job. Was it the best? No, but it was really, really good. And then C, even a 3, good. That was good. Like, don't you like it when your wife tells you, man, that was a good dinner that you cooked?
My example for good is your neighbor, your aunt, your uncle came and watched the concert and they said, wow, that was good.
Yeah.
Because they're not trained. They don't know how to hear it. So they didn't leave thinking, oh, that was kind of iffy. They enjoyed it. And as far as they could tell with their knowledge, that was a fantastic performance.
Yep.
And that's, to me, what good is.
And look, nobody gets 5s anymore.
No.
Which it's a big blow to get a 5. But the 4 has kind of replaced it. If you get a 4, oh my gosh, like, and this is fair to me. Now, clearly, if you're getting a 4, there's work to be done. And we can blame it on circumstances or whatever, or, we're not necessarily going to get into that, but we've kind of devolved our scaling system here to where everybody needs to get a 1. And the reality is not everybody should get a 1.
Correct.
And we should stop saying that band directors or bands or kids are only good if they get 1s.
Right.
And like, oh, you got a 2. Like, oof.
And we should also remember to think about what a 4 actually means.
Yeah.
I've heard bands that were up and coming get a 4, and then it's really easy to write them off.
Exactly. And it's like a 4 can be used as you're almost to good. Like there's some things here that we still need to work on, but don't get discouraged. Whereas right now I feel like you get a 4, it's like I might as well quit.
Right.
And go find another job. Because that reflects on the band director.
And that kind of dichotomy is what's confusing, because in the education, in the academic world, we preach growth over everything else.
Yeah.
And then when it gets to practical application, it is accuracy. And that's confusing to students. That's confusing to adults. You teach one thing and then you ask for something else.
Yep. The best educators on this campus are the ones that are celebrating the kids that got approaching basic. Because they couldn't, like, these are the kids at the beginning of the year that we didn't think were going to make it to the end of the year. And like, I'm gonna shout out Missy Spruill real quick. I see her loving on and impressing on and celebrating these kids that she's able to push to get to approaching basic scores. Those are that's the fair in this category.
Yeah.
Those are the people that we should be supporting the most with this. We should be revering the superiors. Like, clearly, like, above and beyond absolute stellar examples. But we should be extremely proud of the excellence in the 2s, because they deserve to be recognized as well, because it was an excellent performance. Don't you want your kids to go to an excellent school? Don't you want your kids to be in an excellent band program? Don't you want what Producer Brownfield, what would an excellent football team's record for the regular season be?
Well, excellent. I mean, that's, of course, like the point you're making here is just the relativity of it all, right? So
Yeah.
it would depend largely on their schedule, but let's say an average schedule, an average strength of schedule. I would say an excellent team. So a 4 out of 5. I would say 7-3, 8-2 would be excellent. That would be terrific.
Okay.
But how many times in the conversation is there ever, the record be one thing, but man, the defensive line just grew and became better as the season went on.
Oh, certainly, and coaches certainly see that and understand that, and
But the public doesn't.
that's right. And our students who are walking in front of the camera there, as a football player right there. Sometimes the details kind of slip past them a little bit, but it's you certainly see position groups that improve. Fans see it without maybe even knowing the details of it. The positions group, the position groups improve. Individual players improve.
The play calling strategy changes.
Certainly, and sometimes that affects the overall record. Sometimes it doesn't. Right,
But
but the improvement's there, and you notice it, and you praise it, and you nurture it, you water that, because that's how you're going to get to where you end up wanting to be.
And we know that as the coaches and the directors, but then outside people want to see the superiors, and they want to see the win.
They want to look at the scoreboard and the record.
Correct.
Right, and not much else, because that's easy.
Well, and I would say that we get to live in a bubble where the band directors are the ones that get to determine
Right.
how people view this, because it's the band director community that's really concerned about this. You know,
Nobody else really.
well, we impress it upon to our children, and our children impress it upon to the parents.
Right.
You know, and then the parents who have been in the band programs that, especially in Ascension Parish, there's tons of familial reoccurrence through our programs. You know, we're the ones that get to control. Football teams don't get to control that.
Right. They don't.
You know, the community gets to determine if it was a good season or not. You know, because I would argue this year, Saints finished, 9-8 is where we ended up?
9-8, yeah.
9-8. Drew Brees in his first season, I think, was 9-8, or second season, maybe it was 9-8, and heralded as like, this is the best thing ever to happen to the Saints. But this year, you look at the same exact record, not exact because we didn't have 18-week season back then, but you look at a very similar record, and everybody's like, oh, the Saints are garbage.
Right.
You know, because it wasn't exciting football.
Right.
You know, it wasn't exciting football. So we have to make this exciting.
Correct.
We have to make that too exciting. We have to make it excellent. Right? And we're fortunate enough that we get to control that. The population doesn't get to.
Right.
So I think we as band directors need to do a better job of stepping outside of, and whether it's for the kids or not, because I would argue that most band directors really are doing it for the kids, but it's evolved into ones are going to make the kids feel better about their performance, or we get to bring a trophy home and it's going to make them feel better and it's going to make them want to stay. It's all about retention. Like,
Right.
we want to keep our kids because we know what band can do for them. We know how much fun they're having, and it's easier to hook students onto something that's winning.
Right.
We need to get out of the winning
Right.
thing. There is no winning in music. There is only growth, emotional attachment, and development from the elements that we're teaching. It's only going to make them better.
Right.
And everything you're just saying is exactly what recently retired Coach Nick Saban says all the time. You know, it's process over results.
Yep.
And when you focus on the process, the results will take care of themselves.
Correct.
Often that is the theory, and I've found that to be true. But you're right. Focusing on the process allows you to much more authentically award growth as it happens, which is going to further that growth and nurture it and grow that growth, you know. And not enough people understand that. You know, they're focused on results, and of course, our system is focused on results.
It is.
You know, but focusing on results is not the way to get the results you want.
Correct.
And I think that you just encapsulated that very well.
One last quick citation for football, and then we'll get out of it. The Detroit Lions this year.
Look at those guys.
Results,
Yeah.
not driven. They are not driven by the results. Dan Campbell was driven by the process, biting kneecaps every week until they were in the NFC Championship, almost in the Super Bowl. Okay? And yes, it's unfortunate that they didn't make it all the way, but I mean, there's no better story, you know,
Right.
in a national media right now than that.
Kick a couple field goals, and it's an even better story. Right?
You're right.
That's a different podcast.
All right, so now that we're out of our heavy-duty band director talk, we have a civilian question from our friend Faith. Faith, why don't you come on over and come ask us this question?
Do I say no?
Yeah.
So how do y'all come up with like the big routines that y'all do? So like the Metallica, how did y'all create that music?
Okay. That's a great question, Faith. So first off, let's talk about how we get to that point. We get to that point by sitting down the year before and just deciding a theme, right?
Theme and concept.
And even if we're talking about just like marching band music in general, like we just pick what we want to do based on the needs of the students, the abilities of the students, the needs of the crowd, you know, who we're playing to, and the purposes of what we're doing. So if you can establish all of those things, then it's like, okay, we're going to pick this piece of music to do with our kids. Okay. Now, where do we go from there?
Right.
The music writing aspect. Do you want to say anything? Because I'm about to go on a diatribe.
Yeah, well, so you asked about the Metallica show, like, and so how that how that came to be was, we had a different theme and a different concept already picked out, and then when the contest was announced, me being the huge Metallica fan, I'm like, no, we're jumping on this. I called Mr. Gambino. He's like, why are you even running this bot? Like, do it. Okay, let's go. And so they gave us a list of songs to choose from, and then my background knowledge of how all the songs operate, what they look like live, I put together a flow of, well, this song can go into this and this can do that, and then we sat down and we started taking that music, and then we made it, we put it all together, and then we came up with the entire show. And most of the time it works kind of like that. You have a concept, you have an idea, which creates a theme. Then from that theme, you get the songs, and from the songs, you put it together, and then you figure out, are you going to buy it from someone else? You're going to write it yourself. Mr. Gambino happens to be our resident arranger and composer most of the time.
And that's where I come in, and that's where the rest of your question is kind of based in. In our pre-production meeting, we were kind of talking about it. Once we decide that either we're going to buy it from somebody, or I'm going to write it, or somebody's going to write it, we have to analyze a couple of things. And the first thing is ability level and what's already out there. What we're trying to go for is, you're either trying to find something that is really recognizable and you want to match the recording, or you want something that combines different elements. And so once again, once you figure out what that is, then it's listening to the music. So I will, whatever song that I want to write, that I'm going to arrange, I will listen to it over and over and over and over and over and over and over again, so I can hear and determine all the different elements. So we break it apart and we figure out the elements. The elements mostly are melody, accompaniment, harmony, and counterpoint. Okay? So the melody is like the main thing that you would hear, pop goes the weasel, right? That's the melody. Okay? The melody we can assign to certain instruments, and we just pick. We just determine, like, you want it to be heard by an instrument. Well, the trumpets are pretty loud, and they're most of the time they have the melody. The flutes and the clarinets a lot of times have the melody. So we assign that part to that. Then I listen to it, and I use a piano, and I figure out every note, and I write out that melody. And then it's figuring out the harmony or the background. A lot of times I'll start with harmony too. Like I'll figure out what the chord progression is, like, what a guitar would play underneath or what a piano would play underneath. I start with that, and I'll write that out, and I'll figure out exactly what chord progression goes through, and I'll have that out. Then I'll write the melody out, and then it's determining who's going to have what element, who's going to have the harmony, who's going to have the counterpoint, which is like the opposite of the melody, right? There's a melodic passage, and there's something else that happens in, juxtaposition to that. So then it's determining who's going to have what. Same thing as in volleyball or in basketball or in football or any, we're going to assign different jobs for every player.
The hardest thing for me whenever I'm arranging, of course, I don't do it as often as you do, but when I do, a lot of times it's not so much figuring out what to put where, but what to omit.
Yeah.
And what I can omit.
That's true.
Because you can't put everything in there.
Yeah.
When you're translating from that, like a pop song to a marching band song.
And so, Faith, to answer your question very simply and very plainly, is it's all about role assigning, figuring out who's going to be the best person for that job, determining what the elements are, and figuring out who's the best person for that job. So thank you for that question. It was a really great question. So we're running out on time here for today. But real quick, what's on our playlist, guys? What you got, Mr. Lee? What you been listening to?
Well, I'm about to go. Well, right now I've got mariachi and various heavy metal stuff, but I'm about to go on an 8-hour trek on a conference next week, and I'm going to be listening to a lot of music from my proposed theme for our marching show next year. So I'm going to start my homework and research is starting.
Mystery playlist there. Huh?
Maybe. I've been listening to a ton of Lawrence, the band Lawrence, R&B funk. Sibling duo, Gracie and Clyde. They're coming to New Orleans next year, and so I'm going. Oh yeah, I definitely going to that concert, and so I've been kind of cranking down on my Lawrence listening. Producer Brownfield, what you been listening to?
John Prine and Bob Dylan.
All right.
I'll listen to his old school, but yeah, a lot of John Prine, a lot of Bob Dylan, a lot of singer-songwriter action there.
Very nice, very nice. I like it. Well, ladies and gentlemen, that's going to be all for us today with From the Tower. We're going to make sure to catch you next time. Tune in. You can find us on YouTube, Spotify, Apple Podcast, anywhere you can find your EATV podcast. So thanks so much, Mr. Leake, Producer Brownfield, for being with us, and we'll see you next time.